reading. And,
Okay.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the last official Green Party Leadership Contest debate. We are so glad that you're here with us this morning. I feel very short at this podium.
you are short.
It's also apparently the afternoon, Perry has informed me. I don't know what time it is. I have been up for a little while with a 10-month-old. I'm so glad that you're here. For folks who are coming in and looking for seats, there are a few seats that are scattered throughout. Please, I know it feels awkward, but it isn't. Come take a seat up at the front. It's the best spot, I promise. We're so glad that you're here and that you took the time on this beautiful day to join us for this really important conversation. Our goal today is to help you get to know the candidates a little bit better and hear from them on some policy pieces that have been submitted by you as important as you consider how to vote for the next leader of the Green Party of Prince Edward Island. My name is Tayte Willows, and I'm going to be your moderator today. I'm also going to work really hard to not speak like a newfie and slow down. But if at any point you feel that I am speaking too quickly, just throw something at me. I know how to slow down. I just sometimes forget. Yeah, I actually equipped Kathy at the front with projectiles. So thank you again for being here. Yes, cake. Easily distracted. Just to go over some housekeeping before we get started, today's event is going to be recorded so that we can post it on YouTube after the fact. The camera's at the back. So two pieces about that. One, if you are choosing to stand, that's great. Just make sure you don't stand right in front of the camera. Otherwise, we get 2 hours of footing of your back, which isn't very helpful to us. Also, it does mean there's cords on the ground back there, so please be careful as you walk. We don't want anyone wiping out. We would submit that for America's Funniest Home Videos, but wouldn't be very helpful for everyone. We also hope that as you were coming in, you saw the donation and membership table. Remember that in order to vote in this leadership contest, you must be a member of the Green Party. So please remember to get your membership. If you're not certain if your membership is active, you can email the party and we will help you to figure that out. Yes, your membership must be active by May 8th. Sorry, I have to turn my page. That's where we're going to get started. So with that, I'm going to introduce our two candidates who are already up here on stage with me. Hannah Bell holds an MBA in Innovative Management from UPEI, a diploma in Computer Science, and certificates in Project Management and Climate Leadership. She has held senior roles at Veterans Affairs Canada, Timeless Technologies, and has led the PEI Business Women's Association. Active in her community, Hannah serves on the board of the PEI Coalition for Women in Leadership, the PEI Rape and Sexual Assault Center, and is the chair of the PEI Rotary Literacy Foundation. She was elected to the PEI legislature in 2017 and then re-elected in 2019. She served as the critic for finance, climate action, and social development, and the chair of the Public Accounts Committee, passing 6 pieces of legislation, including the Renoviction Moratorium and the Poverty Elimination Strategies Act. Today, Hannah works as an independent management consultant for nonprofits, small businesses, and educational institutions. She lives in Parkdale with her daughter, mother, and 3 dogs, and 2 cats. She loves gardening, the beach, and long dog walks. Thank you, Hannah, for being with us today. We also have Matt MacFarlane, who is the MLA for District 19 Borden-Concora, who was elected in February 2024 by by-election for the Green Party of PEI. A lifelong South Shore resident, Matt has been a strong advocate for his community, serving as co-chair of the South Shore Health and Wellness Centre and president of the Atlantic branch of the Kidney Foundation of Canada. His leadership helped secure a provincial renal clinic at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. Matt holds a BA in Political Studies from UPEI and a law degree from the University of Ottawa. He worked in the Senate and the Department of Foreign Affairs before returning to PEI to run a general law practice for the past 20 years. Deeply committed to community service, Matt has served on numerous nonprofit boards in health, environment, and business sectors. Matt was born and raised in Disable and now lives in Augustine Cove with his wife, Joanna. Thank you so much for both of you for being here today. We can give them a big round of applause. Thank you so much. So before we begin our debate portion today, in the spirit of reconciliation, we do want to acknowledge that the land upon which we gather is the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. This land is covered by the historic treaties of peace and friendship. We pay our respects to the Indigenous people, past, present, and future, who have occupied and cared for this island. Given that a land acknowledgement without action is empty, we would like to take this moment to encourage you to consider what actions you will take in the next month to further reconciliation in PEI. This might look like finding ways to support and amplify Indigenous voices here in PEI and across the country. It might involve seeking out information and educational material about areas where your own understanding has shown area and space to grow. It could also involve advocating with your leaders for policies that align with the calls to action in the Truth and Reconciliation Report. We each have a part to play as we move forward as treaty people, and we do want to encourage you to own that piece for yourself. So with that, I'm going to move into the flow of our debate. And then I promise I'm going to hand it over to the people you're actually here to hear from. So today's event is to help inform your decision in this leadership contest. And we are very grateful that you came today. We're looking forward to a respectful and thoughtful exchange of ideas. And to support this, we will ensure that our candidates have equal speaking time. We'll be alternating the order of their answers as well. We do ask that the candidates not interrupt each other. They've been very good at this. And we will be asking that you hold your applause. The only reason for this is because we really like to clap, and it's really hard for me to be heard over you, and then we're just gonna go for like 7 hours. And I know you all wanna get back to the garden. So following their opening statements, we're gonna hold on the applause. We all okay with, I'm seeing nods, so that's great, excellent. All right, so with that, today's event is going to be more focused on the policy side, as I mentioned at the beginning. The questions we're using here were based on feedback that we've received from our members. We've also added some questions that were submitted during the AGM. To start though, our candidates will each have 1 minute, 60 seconds to share with us about their long-term vision for the Green Party of Prince Edward Island. In a coin toss, Matt got to choose, and he has chosen to go first. So you can go ahead, Matt.
Thank you, Tayte, and thank you all for being here. My name is Matt MacFarlane, and it is my pleasure to stand before you as a candidate for the position of leader of the Green Party of Prince Edward Island. The question we've been asked to consider in 60 seconds or less is our vision for the long-term future for the Prince Edward Island Green Party. I'm going to change that a little bit. My short-term vision for the Green Party of Prince Edward Island is to form the very next government of Prince Edward Island. Short, long, well, I'm going on the short term. How are we going to do that? We're going to do that by being an inclusive party. We're going to bring people together. We're going to have growth in every district in Prince Edward Island. We're going to have strong leadership that attracts people to our party. And we're going to do that by listening, by hearing from Islanders from tip to tip about what those issues are that this party needs to address to be relevant and credible in their eyes. I'm told daily that the Green Party has an opportunity to form the next election, the next government in the next election, and together I believe that we can do the hard work and make that happen.
Thank you so much. Well done. Yeah. As we said to both the candidates, it's not a lot of time. So you can applaud after that opening statement. Thank you so much, Matt. I appreciate it. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Hannah for the same.
Thank you, Tayte. It is not a lot of time. It's for people who like to talk. The question about long-term vision, I appreciate what Matt says about thinking about where we are right now, but it is also about being really clear about what action we actually have to take. Strong, clear commitments. I envision a party that has a strong community presence from tip to tip and provides a home for Islanders who right now don't feel their political voice has a place to go. I envision local organizations supported and empowered to do what works in their communities to build, engage, and connect, where the Green Party is visible and active all year round, not just during campaigns or fundraising. Organizational success comes from building momentum that becomes a movement. Members are valued for their perspective and their experience, as well as their bank account and their email address. And simplified processes that make sure we have good governance, but that it is not a barrier to participation. Okay, we need to make sure that our party is accessible, and accessible means thinking about what are the things that stop people.
Thank you so much, Hannah.
See, ran out of time.
See, it goes so fast. And so thank you for our candidates who have already said they're not going to. There we go. Well done. Thank you. And great applause. You guys could have like a future in the Wheel of Fortune. Thank you to our candidates. I am going to be keeping us on time, so I will be interrupting if necessary, and I've already asked their forgiveness, and we'll pay them in cake later. So thank you for those opening statements. I appreciate it. With that, we're going to move into our policy discussion. So this, we're going to focus on 6 big topics. We'll move through them 2 questions each. Each candidate will have 90 seconds for an initial response. Then the other person will have their 90 seconds for an initial response. Then the first person who answers will have a 30-second rebuttal or addition if they feel like it. Yeah. To build on those answers. Does that seem clear? Everyone's ready to go? All right. So with that, Hannah, you get to go first for this question. And we're starting with a topic around environment and climate change. PEI is on the front lines of climate change. Some parts of our shoreline are being eroded at rates of up to 1 meter per year due to sea level rise and more powerful storm surges. We're still recovering from 2 major once-in-a-lifetime storms, which have both happened since 2019. Generally warming temperatures and disruptions in precipitation patterns are impacting our major local industries like agriculture and fisheries. What kind of measures do you believe government should prioritize to help PEI communities and industries adapt to the impacts of climate change that are already here and can be expected to worsen in the future?
So I need 90 minutes, not 90 seconds.
You got it.
There's 3 main questions in there. I'm going to start with adapt. And one of those is that we need to recognize the amount of damage that we are experiencing now. For instance, we've lost in some areas up to 40% of our forestry, which is not just an issue in terms of hardwood production, but it's also carbon capture. So replanting and managing our forests is a part of that story. Shoreline erosion in particular is being addressed very clearly in the Land Use Planning Act and all the reports and recommendations we have from there, but the government isn't implementing them. So a Green government would make that commitment to taking those bold actions, which are frankly are not going to make everybody happy, but are essential to protect our coastline and protect then the land that we and resources that we have that underpin and support our primary industries. We're seeing the impact with things like the MSX with oysters, the amount of land that we're losing from agricultural spaces into building. Thank you to my colleague Matt for his amazing legislation. But that's just the beginning. We need to have a clear plan and legislation to support it that protects the resources that are required to support our primary industries. And I'm just looking at my time here. There we go. I'm not going to start a new point because I would only have a few seconds. But we know what we need to do. We have to have the political will and the boldness to actually take the action that's required.
Thank you so much for that, Hannah. All right, Matt, the same question to you.
Great, thank you, Tayte. So I think, unfortunately, where we're at right now in the world is we need to get climate and the climate change back on our agenda because it has fallen off the table, unfortunately. With the federal election, it was just an afterthought, anything to do with climate mitigation strategies. So we need to get that conversation going again. And the Green Party is the only party, I'm quite confident, saying that's going to be able to do that. So what does that mean? What do we do to get the conversation started? Well, we need to advocate to our government as a party, as individuals, of what we need them to do for us. So we need to get the solar rebate back instated again. We need to move in renewable energy, because renewable energy on a price per kilowatt basis is the way we need to go if we're going to do our part as a small province to mitigate against the effects of climate change. I did have the bill. It was to do with agricultural land. Very pleased that it passed. But agricultural land is a depository for carbon. So we need to keep those fields, the cropland available. We need to invest in large-scale renewable projects. We don't need a $500 million diesel generator that Maritime Electric is looking to purchase and sit down on the waterfront. We do not need that when we have such access to renewable resources from wind and from sun. So those are some of the directions that we can do. We have to be mindful of our size. We have to be mindful of what we can do, but we have to punch above our weight and ask for everything we can.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Our next, and a rebuttal. I will get this right. So, Hannah, you have 30 seconds to respond.
Sure. I do think, when we talk about renewables and renewable energy, it is a key piece of the story and how PEI mitigates some of the impacts of climate adaptation. But we have to recognize that our land itself is the most fragile resource we have. We're a sandbar. We have to protect the land that we have so we can maintain our way of life as islanders. And that's going to require some really bold action. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well done. They are doing a great job keeping this to their answer. So thank you for that, folks. You're doing great. The next question, Matt, you'll get to go first, is aside from climate change, what do you see as one of the most neglected environmental issues on PEI today? And how should we as a province approach that issue?
One of the biggest, well, there's so many areas of neglect, unfortunately, where we're at right now in the province when it comes to climate change. As we've talked about, land is such a valuable resource that we can use at our disposal to act. If we protect it, we can have that at our disposal to protect against climate change. But specifically, I'm thinking right now in my head, I'm thinking of lack of protections for estuaries, which holds back the sea in certain places of intrusion. I'm thinking of the importance of protecting our forestry. That's also been neglected. We've had forestry reports. Unfortunately, the minister's already come out and said he's not going to implement the recommendations of the forestry report, which is really disgraceful, I think, after you engage such a strong committee, a task force to look into forestry and to come back and say we're not going to implement all. Because by implementing all of those recommendations, we create strong forests for multiple purposes, but primarily as a carbon sink. And we need to rebuild our forests. So I'm trying to be specific to the one thing. I'm going to hone in on forestry for this one, Tayte, in the time that we have. We need to be proactive in rebuilding our forests and planting trees. We should be taking out of farmland land that is not suitable for cropping, tree those fields out, and enhance our forests in Prince Edward Island. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Hannah?
Thank you. We'll see how much we can fit in. I think one of the issues that we often don't talk about here, which I think should be paying more attention to, is the risk to our drinking water. Okay, yeah. Our water table is actually really potentially exposed to saltwater incursion, particularly with land erosion and with the big changes that are coming with climate change. And we forget, again, that our water is all entirely coming from our own aquifer. That's a real risk for PEI with a growing population and an increasing dependency on crop irrigation. So it's something we should be really thinking about and planning for. The other thing that I'm going to fit in my time is I think one of the most neglected environmental issues on PEI is our dependency on cars. And so transportation is responsible for up to 50% of emissions in PEI. And we're not talking about it because we love our cars too much. We can invest in public transportation in a meaningful, significant way, increasing coverage and routes and the service frequency, and actually change the patterns of how we use vehicles here. That would have an incredible impact on our quality of life here in PEI and on us meeting our net zero targets. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Excellent. Matt, now you have 30 seconds.
No, and thank you, Tayte. I appreciate the opportunity to support what Hannah's indicated there on the waterfront. I mean, that's critical. We have such a limited reserve, in my opinion, of water. We don't have access to water other than what's already in the ground. That's where our water is. And we're seeing now that there are emergence of forever chemicals that are in the water. And that's very, very disturbing, and it's concerning. We need to apply the precautionary principle when it comes to how we're going to be allowing our water to be used either for irrigation, for commercial, industrial use, etc.
Thank you so much. That's great. One of the things that I appreciate about this debate and how folks much smarter than me have structured it is that, similar to the leader of our party, our candidates are going to be asked to jump all over the place. If you've ever watched Question Period, it never stays on one topic for long. So now we are going to move to a question from the floor around healthcare. So with that, this question reads, oh, sorry, I moved the paper to the wrong place. This question reads, there is Hannah, for you first.
Okay.
There is an amazing amount of administration in our healthcare system. How would you bring this under control?
That is an excellent question. we know from the people in the system talking about it, how insane some of the healthcare can be and the number of steps that are involved. Often we put administrative steps in place because we don't trust other people. So we put them in place because you need to get a sign off on how much money something costs, or you need a supervisor to look at it. And so sometimes, when you want to solve a problem like this, you look at sort of why are these barriers in place? And a lot of the administration we have is not trusting people to be able to make good decisions. So if my doctor makes a recommendation for a referral, they're a doctor. I figure they know what they're talking about. Does that need to go through 6 more stages before the referral comes back 18 months later, for example? That's one of the big places. The other one is that we need to stop hiring people who aren't from PEI to solve PEI problems. Right? And I know that's something that is a recurring theme, but we don't need consultants from Toronto to tell us how our healthcare system should work here. We have the expertise here, and we need to look to those creative solutions for problems that come from the people who are working in the system. And as soon as we start listening and taking on those hard problems and the hard solutions that come from the people on the front line, the more likely we are to actually be able to solve the problems in a meaningful way. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Excellent. Matt, over to you.
Oh, thank you. And as I make these remarks, I'm conscious that we have the chair of the board of Health PEI, Diane Griffin, in our audience.
Yeah. Don't hold back.
I'm going to start my comments by saying I've always been a strong advocate for strong governance policy administered by strong boards of directors. And I'm not just saying that because Senator Griffin is in the crowd. I'm saying that because I firmly believe that any organization, big or small, can be effectively run by a strong board of governors that operates under a strategic plan duly set in conjunction with the executive director or leader that then provides oversight to ensure we're meeting the targets of that strategic plan. What I don't like seeing in our healthcare system right now is redundancies and duplications of effort at the leadership level. We are top-heavy at the leadership level in our Department of Health. And going through the budget debates, which we're doing in healthcare right now, we're seeing overlap and duplications and redundancies at the department level and at the Health PEI level. And it's time we streamlined our organization. There's bloat in the delivery of our healthcare system, and that's what's creating problem. There's toes being stepped on. There's money being sent to KPMG consulting firm in Toronto, millions, I should say, and that duplicates the executive leadership team that we have here in PEI, at Health PEI, that should be able to deliver on our healthcare needs in Prince Edward Island without sending that money away.
Thank you so much, Matt. Hannah, 30 seconds to you.
Yeah, I think we're both on the same page here in kind of broad strokes. I mean, it's, governance is there to ensure that we follow the rules and that we protect everyone. And in healthcare, that's obviously really critical, because if you don't protect people properly, people will die. But you can put too many layers in, and finding that balance between the two is the one where we need the experts at the table. But we have to be ready for the fact that not everybody will love that process, and that's okay.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. All right, we're moving into our next section. Thank you for that question from the floor earlier during the AGM. We are now going to have 2 questions about the economy. So the first question, which will go to Matt first. In reaction to the American tariffs being imposed and threatened by President Donald Trump, one of the responses of the PEI government has been to bring forward sweeping legislation to reduce what are known as interprovincial trade barriers in an effort to mitigate the effects of these tariffs. Do you believe this is a good way to protect PEI's economy? Why or why not?
Thank you, Tayte. I believe a good way to protect PEI's economy is to bring strong, duly thought out, process-driven, thoughtful, consultative legislation, not the legislation that this government put on the floor of the legislature in this sitting that was rushed, and it was a copy and paste job from the Nova Scotia legislation that they tried to impose in our province. And if anyone was watching the debate on that, you'll see that it got a bit of a rough ride, as it should have, because we don't need to be relying and copying and pasting other provinces' legislation that could have unintended side effects. On the issue of interprovincial trade barriers being lessened willy-nilly, I do have some concern about that, because we in Prince Edward Island have developed over many years a strong local economy with strong small business. And my concern going around the island and talking to small business is they're concerned about opening up our economy to the bigger fish. We're a small pond. We can be eaten up by some of the bigger fish, and that could include some of our smaller growers, some of our smaller breweries, for example, and smaller industries. So we have to do it very thoughtfully, because if we don't do it thoughtfully, and if we just jump on board because it's the flavor of the day, then we could be having negative consequences and creating side effects down the road that we're just not sure of. But that's my concern. Yes, I think there are areas where we could be operating a little bit more efficiently with the economy that we have, but my big concern is that we have strong local economy.
Thank you so much. Hannah, over to you.
Thank you. Well, perhaps this is where Matt and I have a little bit of a difference. I agree that the legislation that's gone through has been incredibly rushed and not evidence-based that's appropriate for PEI. But there is strong evidence that opening up markets, particularly for small businesses that haven't previously had the opportunity to export, would actually benefit our economy. We have right now a heavy focus, and have had for many years, on economic investment being made for companies that can export internationally. But most small businesses don't do that. Most small businesses sell locally and they employ locally. And when they can grow their business by perhaps being able to ship to New Brunswick or to Nova Scotia or to Quebec, that money is going to go straight back into the economy here. It's one of the most successful things that we could do for our local economy. And frankly, the Liquor Commission has been a barrier to opening up interprovincial trade to protect local breweries. It has not been an advocate for this. The local breweries that I've spoken to are actually really supportive of this. A competitive environment is healthy for business. A limited competitive environment, which is what we're talking about here, opening up trade across Canada, could be one of the best things we could do for our local economy. And that money, as I said, comes directly back into Islanders' pockets, not to some big business somewhere else. So the piece that we need that carries risk for me in this legislation was about the opening up of regulated trades. You know, veterinarians who maybe aren't licensed appropriately, massage therapists who haven't got their qualifications, pharmacists who don't have training in the PEI environment. That's why we need to be careful when we open up things like this. They are based in evidence that comes from the experts in the field.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Matt, 30 seconds for you.
Yeah, like so many things, I guess it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, and I think Hannah and I have talked to different breweries, because the brewery that I talked to indicated that the cost to ramp up to achieve access to overseas, over the Northumberland Strait markets, it's just not worth it for them. It's just not going to work for them to expand their market and their product line and their distribution and incur the transportation costs. But again, that's why it has to be done carefully and thought out carefully, so we protect some.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. This is why I love PEI back and forth, because you can always talk to all kinds of people. That's great. Thank you. Our next question, staying on the economy, is, aside from these all-consuming U.S. tariffs, can you tell us about one important trend, risk, or opportunity that you see facing the PEI economy over the next 5 to 10 years? And what role do you believe the PEI government could play in helping prepare our economy for that change?
Starts with me?
Yeah.
So the single biggest risk to our economy over the next few years isn't the American tariffs directly, it's actually the impact of climate change and the impact that that's going to have on our primary industries. So fishing, farming, broader agriculture and tourism are all going to be impacted, and these are the foundation of the economic engine of our province. The tariffs are an additional whole layer on top of that we frankly don't need, and nobody else does either. But that means that we have to look at attacking multiple fronts when it comes to thinking about economic responsiveness. And some of the key things around this is something I just spoke about a moment ago, which is creating a more local and circular economy that supports our own communities, community to community, as well as remaining accessible and invested in international trade where it is possible, but also looking at how we pivot and change as our markets shift and change because of the impact of climate, which is unavoidable. So sustainable tourism versus cruise ships. Our oyster industry is in trouble. How can we help the oyster industry to pivot and change? Maybe, like we said, we need to go into farming oyster spat that's safe from MSX. The change that's coming to the main crops that we can grow here. And these are all things that we need to be talking about now, because we can't pretend that we don't know that they're coming later. And our economy can thrive if we get ahead of these rather than reacting, that we can be proactive and think and plan ahead.
Thank you so much. Matt,
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's a big issue, and if we're setting aside the issue of tariffs, then yes, I fully concur with Hannah that climate change is going to have such huge impacts on our primarily on our resource economy. And if we look and see the new varieties of potatoes that are being developed, drought resistant, that's a step in the right direction for our province right now to ensure that if we're going to maintain this monocrop model of farming that we've been doing for so long, then if we base that on that premise that we're going to keep doing that, then we need to be able to make sure that what we put in the ground is going to come out in a harvestable and a marketable manner. A few years ago, we've been talking about a Green New Deal, and I really would love to see that come again at a national perspective of a transition away to support the workers during a period of transition away from reliance on oil and gas. And that's obviously nationwide. But now I'm so concerned we're hearing renewed talk about pipelines. I think we need to invest in a Green New Deal, train the workers that can work in new industry, new technology, expand the wind turbine program, solar photovoltaic array technology, work towards moving our province at the forefront of that, because we shouldn't be the last to the party on this. It's going to happen. It is going to happen. But I would really love to see us as a province take the lead on this and be a desirable place for workers to come in this industry.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate it. Hannah?
Yeah, just a quick follow-on from this one is part of the connection of that being able to get ready for this and the growth in the economy that goes with it is how much of a challenge we have in retaining workers, particularly young workers. So training and retaining youth is a large chunk of how we can actually achieve this work. There's a fantastic model called the Youth Climate Corps out of BC that actually hires and trains youth into doing energy efficiency, things like energy efficiency retrofits, tree planting, all of those kind of amazing clean tech, green tech things that we need to have happening. So there's a way to do both. There's a way to kind of stimulate the economy to support our
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. That
I
is
like that red one.
Yeah. It's fast. Can we just give a round of applause for these two candidates? They made it through a third of the debate. You want to take a seat? So now we're going to do something that's a little different from a normal debate, because we do want to give our candidates each a time to talk to us a little bit about their vision, what they think they need to do, and that's a bit weird to do in a debate format. So I brought my cozy conversation blanket. I'm going to make my way over to Matt, because he's going to get to go first. Hannah, if you want to sit for a few minutes, take a breather, all that good stuff. There you go. I'm not going to trip. That's my goal.
You aren't caught up in the cable.
Well, it would be a good show for everyone. So Matt I'm going to give him all the instructions. Matt is going to have 6 minutes for him and I just to have a little chat about some of the things that you've mentioned before in terms of your vision, but we're going to start off with a question, and then we'll go back and forth. Not a timed answer. It's going to be nice and easy. Feeling ready?
6 minutes to answer this question?
6 minutes for us to have a little... Yeah, he's just going to talk straight. Joe's going to read from the encyclopedia. Yeah. So, Matt, my question for you is, and you kind of jumped to it when we talked about long-term, and you said, I want to talk about the short-term. I'm wondering, if you become leader, what are the things that would be the first priority for you to do in that first, 90 days? I think in the States it's 100 days. What's the big thing for you to start with?
Well, hopefully the legislature won't still be sitting at that time, although we may make that happen, I'm not sure. So it's so important to get out. I'm going to talk to the audience. Don't feel like I'm being rude, please. I really think it's crucial and critical to get out and go across the island, and I've already started to do that. It's been a very enjoyable and fun part of my job since being elected. It's not strange to go to people's houses now and just knock on their door.
Did you do that a lot before?
I did.
Okay.
I did, and to various degrees of response. So, but as an MLA, you can go and do that and set up meetings And I've had some help with that. I've had some people coming around with me, going and making introductions to new people that I haven't met. So we're doing more mass. So that's, I think, important. I don't want to take up my 6 minutes, but I think it's so important to get out and meet new people who might be green curious, who might follow what we're doing in the legislature and be so excited about what's happening in the legislature and have a chance to sit down and hear what's important to them.
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you for that. And you've mentioned that before. You've talked in answers before about wanting to build a big tent, about wanting to bring people into our party, which I think is an honorable vision. As we all know, though, sometimes as you grow those big tents, you start to see dissension grow and you see people who disagree. And how would you as a leader help to bridge those divides and get people on the same page so that, as you hope, we move forward and can form government?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a couple of answers to that. There's the big green tent, and then there's the big province-wide tent, because there's not everybody who's going to want to get into the big green tent like a membership tent, right? So I'm hoping to have that tent as huge as possible, but I recognize that not everybody is going to come into that particular space and want to be a card-carrying member, and that's fine. But I think what we need to do also is show ourselves as a party as being government in waiting, that we are a credible, relevant alternative to what so many people have sort of banked their votes on over the last 150 years of red-green dichotomy, I think as Charlotte had indicated earlier today. People want to move away from that, and if we show ourselves as being ready to represent, we can do that.
So what would be the things that you would see as important to build that credibility so that folks can look at us and say, okay, this wasn't a fluke a few years ago. What is it that you think we need to do now to build that credibility?
No, and it's a great reference to a few years ago, because what I'm feeling in the air, the vibe in Prince Edward Island now is very reflective to what I felt in 2018, 2019 coming in when our polls were going up and the excitement was building as a party. And that's where we're at again right now, building that excitement. And I think the reason, to answer your question, how we do that is by continuing to listen to what Islanders have to say, not pretend to know what they want, and not pretend to know that this is the answer for Bill, this is the answer for Sue. That's what the other parties do. It's called top-down. What we do so well and what we do so effectively is we listen to people from tip to tip in this province, and we take those concerns, and I think it's being reflected in the legislature now with the 3 Greens we have. I'm hearing that it's from people how refreshing it is to actually have someone to speak concerns to, take those concerns forward, and recommend solutions.
That's really, really interesting. And I think a lot of folks in this room could agree with that. One of the questions that I get, though, from folks is, how do you maintain that as you actually move into forming government? How do you maintain that engagement with the grassroots, maintain the energy that folks can bring when it is really hard to bridge that divide into the legislature?
So if we're in a position of government, I think that's the question, like when we're at that level, not if, but when we're at that level, you continue to do what you did to get there. You don't change course, you don't reinvent the wheel. You continue to be effective listeners and legislators, which is based on what we hear from Islanders, and you make good policy, and you engage tools that have been at the disposal for a long time but have not been used. And I'm thinking of things like Citizens Assembly, which is a fundamental part of how green policy gets created or would be created under a green government. And that way you're gathering, it's democracy at its best. You're gathering the thoughts and the sentiment and the ideas from Islanders tip to tip, and making legislation that's responsive and reflective of those needs.
Yeah. And then how would you help to communicate that, knowing that we have a few by-elections coming up? How would you communicate that now to hopefully move us into official opposition status?
Well, this government, right?
Yeah.
From the
by-elections.
From the by-election, sorry. Yeah, exactly. Well, this is a great start. By having this conversation, by bringing people together with the leadership, by having a contested leadership race, the excitement, we're going to triple our memberships by the time this is over. So people are listening, people are paying attention to what the Green Party is doing, what the Green Party has to offer, and it's just a matter of continuing to be relevant to and responsive to the concerns of Islanders, and actually listening and bringing those concerns forward. And that is a method that's going to continue to work and be effective. It's not a new wheel that needs to be invented. We got there in 2019, and we're going to get there in 20, whatever it's going to be.
20 whenever. Excellent. Thank you so much, Matt. I'm going to follow my own rule and not ask you a question with 15 seconds left. So thank you so much. All right, with that, we're going to move back to your regularly scheduled debate. I'm going to not trip as we move over. Hannah will have the opportunity to do the similar little conversation in a moment after we do another section.
Okay.
Hannah, could you do me a favor, though? I'm stuck under your chair. Thank you.
Arranging
Appreciate
furniture.
it. Thank you so much. All right. So after that little reprieve, I hope you all took a breath, and now we're going to jump back into some more money talk. Actually, is where we're headed. So now we're going to talk about government finances. And Hannah, I believe you went first last time.
Yes.
So Matt, you're going to go first with this question. Last month, the PEI government tabled a budget projecting a record deficit of $184 million. This is coming on the heels of successive large budget deficits, and the result is a projected provincial debt of $4.2 billion by 2027-2028, which would be nearly doubling the provincial debt since this Conservative government was first elected in 2019. I feel like I'm reading a math problem there, and then the train will go in the right direction.
Yeah.
As the leader of the Green Party, how would our party's core value of living within our ecological and financial means inform your approach to balancing the budget and to managing debt in this era of persistent deficit budgets by governments of all provincial stripes? All right, you're good.
Right. Yeah, it's really atrocious how our money is being squandered. I guess that's how I would open with that. We're seeing money invested in really negligent enterprises. We're talking $10 million to an NHL contract. So if we want to start bringing our deficit down and bringing our debt down, we need to start spending money where it's needed, and it's not needed on Toronto consultants, and it's not needed on NHL contracts. So that's the first thing. I've always believed that we pay enough in taxes in this province and in this country that we should have the best healthcare, the best education system, the best, well, roads are probably a bridge too far. Roads are always going to be a challenge in PEI. But I think that we start by spending wisely, not cutting where we need the money, put the money into our schools and into our educations and into our healthcare system. But if we're going to have a tourism strategy, let's have a strategy that's actually going to work, not just writing checks for $10 million. It's abhorrent to me. $20 million on travel nurses. We're wasting money. So my answer to start, Tayte, would be make better use of the money that we have, and then find new ways to generate money within our economy. And that could be something that our tax system might need to look at.
Thank you so much. Hannah, over to you.
Starting from a very similar point, taxes are how we have services. So, talking about tax cuts without being able to explain where that could come from is irresponsible, because that means you're also going to lose critical services. The difference is making the choice about what your priorities are. And our priorities, for a Green government are very much in the services that support people to live healthy, prosperous lives. We do know that the government has traditionally overestimated the deficit and then had surprise money arrive at the end because they underestimate their tax revenue. But we don't know what the impact of the tariffs is going to have on tax revenue. So I'm actually going to be really interested to see how wrong or not wrong they are this year, because tax revenue, particularly corporate tax and sales tax, is a very substantial amount of the government revenue line, and it is going to take a hit this year, potentially. The other thing we also need to talk about is that PEI receives over 40% of its funding from the federal government in the form of transfers. So maintaining that relationship with federal government and having flexibility in how those funds can be used, so better and more open contracts with the federal government, so housing funds can be used for the housing that we need here, not what Ottawa tells us we can build, for example, would be something that would also allow us to be able to do more with the money that we have. Long term, though, we're looking at having a more accurate forecast, so we're not continually racking up deficits, and then having a long-term plan for addressing the debt.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Hannah.
You're welcome.
Matt, 30 seconds to you.
Just on that 40% that we get from Ottawa, the concern that I have is that you take that 40% down to 37% in PEI, and we're so small, that's a huge impact on our bottom line. So that deficit is just going to continue to grow unless we find a way to backfill that money. And there's no plan. Like this government has zero plan if that ever happened to us right now and where that money would come from. What it comes down to is the need for transparency and accountability with our public dollars.
Thank you so much. All right, another question about in this vein. So Hannah, it'll come to you first.
Okay.
In the face of a potential recession, governments will be faced with choices about how to help islanders weather the storm using the financial means it has at its disposal, which could include transfer payments, program spending, and taxation changes. What do you believe are the best ways to help islanders through a potential recession, and why?
Good question. In the last sort of fiscal crisis that we had, which was during COVID, we saw the federal government step up very quickly with CERB. Not necessarily the best program in hindsight, but there were lots. But at the time, it was critical to people being able to keep food on the table and rent. And so, if we do see a significant countrywide crash, the federal government is going to be a partner in that delivery, particularly with the government that we now have in Ottawa. Saying that, the other piece of that story is how important it is that we have on-the-ground programs and services here that are responsive to the unique needs of islanders. And so, a recession is a long-term thing. It's not a short-term, this will be over in a few weeks. We need to think about programs and services that would better address changes in our employment. So if we see significant increases in employment, for example, how do we make sure that people have enough? And we're looking at that case in putting in some form of a basic income guarantee. And we know that that is a priority for PEI. It's a long-term goal for PEI. CERB was a form of, OAS is a basic income guarantee, for example. But if we have a long-term change in our capacity to actually support islanders, we are going to have to talk about how we remodel our social assistance programs so that nobody is left behind.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Matt?
No, thank you, Tayte. And little envious Hannah got to answer this question first, because I do think that so much of the answer revolves around a basic income guarantee model, because we saw through CERB how ineffective that process and that program was to get money out, and the process for the $250 that Red Cross was administering or misadministering, and what people had to go through to get that. It's our economy and our world is so volatile right now that these little ad hoc piecemeal programs of CERB, of this, of that government tries to scramble to roll out to catch up to something reactively, it's not working. It's just not working anymore. And that's why something like a basic income guarantee that would have the administration and the model already in place for that to roll out. So you're not scrambling to get a third party, a Red Cross or something to deliver that. You have that framework already established, and it just pandemic number 2 comes along, knock on wood it doesn't. If it does, you've got that infrastructure in place to get that money out into the hands of people that need it. I think we need to be innovative with a couple of things. A wartime effort is often used. Maybe we look at something like a Canada Savings Bonds issue to generate funds, to generate money for housing. We have to be creative. And again, look at our tax model to see who's paying what at what level of income.
Hannah, if you want 30 seconds to respond.
Thank you. Yeah, the model is already in place. So if you said for basic income guarantee, and we'll probably talk a bit more about this later because it's a real pillar for green policy. But it does require that working relationship with the federal government, but it does mean also that we have more autonomy in where those funds go. And I think that's a combination of both. It's about leveraging the federal relationship where we need to, but recognizing that PEI has its own unique circumstances and a unique population that deserves a unique solution.
Thank you for that. And Hannah's right. We were going to go there, so we're going to go there right now to talk a little bit about basic income guarantee. Given that you've both already touched on this, for this question only, I'm going to just give you the 90 seconds. 90 seconds. We won't do the rebuttal because you've both mentioned it already.
Okay.
Seeing consent, we're all good. Okay. So, as you mentioned, basic income guarantee has been adopted as official policy for the Green Party of Prince Edward Island, and we view it as necessary to permanently break the cycle of poverty. So where you've started to describe what this concept of basic income guarantee means to you, if you could elaborate on that, and whether you see an opportunity to advance this idea in the current political and economic climate where folks are feeling a little bit more scarce in their resources. And Matt, you get to go first.
Oh, thank you. I think we need to continue to advocate for the implementation of it across the board. We've been doing our part in the legislature to make sure that the Minister of Housing hasn't forgotten about it. I know she gets upset when we bring it up, but it's important, and she needs to be aware that people are listening and expecting action on this particular issue. The model is important because we can't continue to address poverty by trying to increase minimum wage up to a point where it's going to become a livable wage, because that's a chase that and a race that we're never going to win. That target is going to be too far away. And the problem with the minimum wage going up and up and up and up too is it places pressure on our small businesses to pay employees, and what they're paying them is still not going to be a livable wage. So it satisfies no one if we're trying to address poverty by simply throwing minimum wage increases here and there. And I note that the next minimum wage increase is not set to go up to $17. It's not going to actually go to $17 until April of 2016, a year from now. So then we're going to be behind the 8 ball, and we're still going to be playing catch up on it. So it's an initiative that we can roll out. Whether we can do it right now, I think Hannah alluded to the fact that we need. We're told we need federal support. We're told we need federal funding from it. I'd like to sit down with the association that's really advancing the basic income guarantee model, Trish Altas and others, and see what we can do at this time.
Thank you so much. Hannah?
Thank you. So I have a pretty deep background in work around poverty, food insecurity and homelessness. The reason the minimum wage is going up to $17 is because it includes the requirement to include measures of poverty, which was a piece of legislation I passed in 2019, and then the Poverty Elimination Strategy Act, which specifically addresses food insecurity and homelessness, was 2021. And I do know the math in the basic income model for PEI. Right now, our model says that we need about $130 million to be able to do that. Now, we can find $130 million in the budget right now, but we'd have to choose what other things we don't do. What we can do in the short term is address the needs of those most vulnerable in our community, which is people who are on social assistance and people who are on disability support. So by radically increasing the supports that those who are absolutely without a doubt in need of and vulnerable, we immediately address those who are most in need and the investment there is in the tens of millions, not 130. And so I think it is about small steps are still steps of improvement, but we must never lose sight that the goal is a basic income guarantee for all. And it's something that is part of the unique opportunity that we have in PEI. There is nowhere else in the world where an entire jurisdiction could have this as an opportunity for their population than there is in PEI. But what we have to do is demonstrate willing, and part of that is showing that poverty and homelessness and in food insecurity are things that we care about enough that we're going to put our money where our mouth is. And that's what I would be looking to do.
Thank you so much, Hannah. Let's give them a round of applause. They're 2/3 of the way through. So, Matt, if you want to take a seat, I'm not bringing my cozy blanket because my goodness, it's warm up here.
It's very warm. Yeah. Hence me losing the jacket.
It's lovely. I will bring my phone though as a timer. So now Hannah and I are going to have a little one-on-one chat. Hannah, hello. How are you doing?
I'm very good, thank you.
Good, I'm glad to hear that. So I'm going to ask you the same question that you also jumped the gun on. If you were elected Green Party leader, what would be your priority in that first 90, 100 days?
Well, I mean, Matt and I have a really similar approach, and it's about what we actually mean when we talk about building the party. I mean, the contested nomination has meant that we've had hundreds of new members join, which is incredible. What do you do when you've got 500 new members? What are you going to say to them? How are you going to tell them that you didn't just really ask them to sign up so you could have their vote and their money? So we do need to think about what that looks like and why we're doing it. And a large chunk of that is if we are truly a grassroots party and want to talk about building a movement that has momentum, then that means empowering communities to tell us what it is that they need. So if I'm going to go out to Lennox Island, then there are protocols and and procedures that I need to follow because that is a First Nation. There are, things that I need to make sure that I do so that I'm appropriately allowed to go, I'm invited. And that community is the community that tells me what they need from us. And maybe what they need from us is just to sit there, be quiet and not talk to us, and then come back 6 more times and maybe we'll talk about it next year. That's okay. Right? Different people need to have different opportunities on how they want to engage. But we're not going to build a grassroots movement if we're not prepared to listen to people who challenge us. Right? We have to be okay with having difficult conversations, because we have not done a great job of always following through on what we promised for people as the Green Party. We have let people down. We have made promises that we couldn't keep. And sometimes we said we were going to talk to them and then we never called them back. And that's one of the first things that you can do when you want to build relationships with people, is just call them back, right? Just sort of say, I thank you so much. I'm here. Thank you for your time. I'm calling you back. And a number of amazing conversations that I've got to have. And then my team, Darcy, Ian, my daughter Ava has been helping me on my campaign. She's only 17. And it's just been amazing to have people who are willing to sort of get on the phone and get on social media and talk to people and reach out to people and just say, will you come back? We would love to have you come back. What do you need from us to have you be part of the party again? Right. So long answer.
No, that's great. That's great. And I think that's a really important part, right? That building, we all agree that's one of the values of the Green Party, is that grassroots movement. How do you stick handle the tension between the time that is required for grassroots democracy and the reality that we could have a snap election any day and we need to be ready to go? How do you straddle that line and ensure that people can come along with you, but that you're also ready to play the game by the rules that have been set?
Well, we heard some really great conversations about that this morning in our meeting, and some of those are around the importance of organization, right? Organization is about creating pockets of expertise and then leveraging those pockets of expertise to build more expertise. So you have these kind of kernels of like 4 or 5 people who are really, really good at something. They're really good at, like organizing a campaign office or getting on the phone with people. At the minimum, you've got them. But ideally, what you have is you can use them to build out more people who have those skill sets, who can then go out and do more work in the community. That kind of networking model, that's the core of how organizational movements work. Right? You start with an amazing skill set in the middle, and it goes out like a dandelion puff. So when you have a short period of time, you also have to pick your priorities. You're not going to be able to do everything. So you have to say, what are the absolutes called a critical path? What are the critical things that we have to do to be most likely to achieve success? We have to have really good candidates. We have to have social media. I don't know. We can make a list that's probably only 5 or 6 things long, which are the go, no go. And all the other things are nice to haves. But if you don't have those criticals, you're not going to get there. So who is it that knows what those critical things are? Who are the people that we can call 24 hours notice and say, we need to hit the ground? And who are then the people that are willing to say, I'm going to teach other people so there's more of us? That's how we do it when we've only got 3 months.
That multiplying effect.
That multiplying
Yeah.
effect. Yeah.
How would you manage then, and I'm gonna take a bit of a turn. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Because you've mentioned in your answer about your vision for the party, you talked about how our ideas are bold, and I think that's one of the things that a lot of folks bring forward is these bold ideas, but sometimes they're unpopular.
Yep.
So when you're leaning into that multiplier effect, how do you bridge that gap for people to say, we need to do this, even if it's going to be uncomfortable? How do you equip volunteers to have that conversation at the door?
Well, and let's be clear, it's really hard, right? It's hard not just for volunteers and people in the party. It's hard when you're elected, because when you're elected, you become very risk averse. You want to be safe. You need to be elected again. And so saying difficult things and doing difficult things is the opposite of what we normally do in politics. It's why everybody walks down the middle line, except the Green Party. And so we are all rooted in the same values. We are all coming from that same space of what we want to see, how we engage with each other, how we support each other, and what we want to see that looks like for PEI. But you also need to be okay with having a conversation. This is something that I don't support, but I support the party's right to support it. Right? So, if there's an ethical issue, then that's a line you can't cross. But if it is something about policy, one of the things we hope is that over time you may find that you're more comfortable with it because you've learned more about it. Like, we are an evidence-based party that talks about the importance of understanding what it is that we're talking about. We often fall into the trap of thinking, this is such a good idea, I don't know why everybody else is so stupid. And that's not the case. We have to take responsibility for explaining and helping people understand that difficult ideas are actually the hardest things to explain. So
Thank you so much. I'm so sorry to cut you off mid-thought, but I hit the end of the 6 minutes. So feel free. I hope both of you you've all learned something about Hannah and Matt through these little one-on-ones, but feel free, pick up those conversations later. Give them a call, send them a Facebook message. Apparently you can show up at Matt's door because he does that to us.
if you didn't know before, now you do.
Thank you so much, folks. All right, we are going to move into our last two sections. And so this one you have you've both made mention about the importance of accountability.
Yeah.
And Hannah, you had answered last time, and even though we cut out that third, I'm going to let you go first for this one.
Okay.
So for Hannah first, Greens have long supported electoral reform, and PEI Green Party members have adopted policy in favor of a citizens' assembly process to come up with a specific and detailed design for an electoral system that is tailored to PEI's needs, and that the citizens' assembly believes would meet the approval of the majority of the island public. In 2021, a Green opposition motion calling for a citizens' assembly on electoral reform was even passed with all party support in the legislature. But the current government and the King Conservative government never answered that call. If you become the next Green Party leader, how would you champion and advance the cause of electoral reform?
Okay. So one thing to be clear on is that Citizens' Assembly is not just to have conversation about electoral reform. That assembly can be used for ways for citizenship to have a voice other than their elected officials. It tends to be very connected in our conversation here in PEI, with the conversation around electoral reform. I think the other thing too is when we had our referendums on proportional representation, those referendums were not held under a fair election system themselves. And I think we know that the first one, which was a clear vote in favour of proportional representation, was thrown out for not having enough of the population participate. And then the second one had criteria that was set to be so difficult that even though one set of criteria matched, I think the other one we missed the criteria by 1% of the vote. That was an incredible blow to the work that had gone into, again, PEI being at the forefront of electoral reform. So I'd like to be pretty bold here and suggest that we've actually already decided what we want for electoral reform, and that if there was a Green government, we would go ahead and implement proportional representation for 2 cycles, and then we could have a referendum after that. But we don't need another assembly to talk about what model we want when we've been looking at models for over 10 years. So proportional representation would be a priority for a Green government led by me. And we have lots of ways that we can assess that.
Thank you so much.
But yeah, clear commitment.
Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you.
Matt, over to you.
Well, thank you, Tayte. I think it's getting actually easier with each election to have the conversation about electoral reform because our eyes are all getting more and more opened as to the negative consequences of having this first past the post system because so many people are being disenfranchised and so many votes just simply aren't counting or going towards having representation in government. So I do think that it is easier even now to have this conversation in the public with people than it was 5 years ago. And there's lots of examples. I won't take my time to go into them, but the last federal election is another perfect glowing example. I guess what I have done already in the last week, we tabled another motion in the Legislative Assembly because the one in 2021, as Hannah said, it didn't go anywhere. It passed, but government has not done anything about it. So we put it back on the radar again. Proportional representation. So it is now going to be back on the floor of the legislature for debate at the first opportunity, just to keep it alive, to keep it in the spotlight, and so people are aware that even though it's not getting as much air or attention in the room as it once did back when we had the plebiscite and the referendum, it's still very much an issue of concern. I do have some concern about imposing it without doing a little bit more consultation. I do feel that a citizens' assembly would have value on this simply to bring people up to where we are. A lot of us in the room know the importance of it. Islanders
Thank
have
you
to
so
get there
much.
too.
Thanks so much, Matt. Hannah, you have 30 seconds.
Yeah, thanks. So motions on the floor of the House are a great way to get attention to a topic, but they're not binding on anybody. And we know that to our peril because we've brought so many motions that were absolutely fabulous and government votes for them and then does nothing. And we have had a referendum on this. We have had a vote on this in PEI and then the response was really clear. In fact, we've done it twice. Obviously, this is the other piece where, as a leader, we already have the policy on our policy book, and we have a membership who would be engaged in the decision-making process when we
Thank you
develop
so
policy
much.
for the next platform.
Appreciate it. Thank you, folks. We could have a whole conversation just about proportional representation, I think.
We frequently do.
Our next question, so Matt, this one will be for you first, is what does government accountability mean to you? And what are some concrete changes that you would make in government to ensure that the first Green government and those that follow have a high degree of accountability to the people of Prince Edward Island?
All right. Thank you, Tayte. I guess I'll start by saying what government accountability does not mean to me, and it does not mean sending in a FOIP request and waiting 5 years to get a response and paying hundreds and hundreds of dollars to get that response. This government has proclaimed itself to be the most transparent government in island history. It is the least transparent government in island history, and it's abhorrent what we see this government do to hide information that should be open access to islanders and not subject to a FOIP request. And anybody in the room who's ever tried to do one, and I know there are a few, will know exactly what I'm speaking about. So to me, government accountability is being open and forthcoming to islanders, being accessible to islanders. The number of people who are calling me for MLA support from all over the island because their own MLA, who happens to be perhaps a member of the government, is not returning calls, simply, as Hannah alluded earlier, returning phone calls. I mean, that is a fundamental, lowest hanging fruit of being in government, is to return the phone calls of the people who put you in power. And it's inexcusable to be hiding from your constituents. So accountability means open access to information, being accessible to islanders tip to tip, being available, being responsive, and getting the work done that islanders expect to get done.
Thank you so much. Hannah?
Thank you. One of the big things that we've heard of on this, like I said, from this government is the transparency and accountability, but I guess the asterisk there is when it suits them. And the challenge with a lot of the work that is done by and for government is that that work is owned for and paid for by islanders. It's our taxpayer dollars that pay for reports and reviews and so on. One of the first things that we could do is ensure that all government-funded reports and studies, like Brendel, for example, or reports out of Iraq, are published. Right, if we paid for them, we should be able to see them. And holding those back is restricting access of islanders to information that they deserve to be able to have access to. Obviously, there is protection of privacy, but the FOIP, that's what it stands for, Freedom of Information and Privacy Protection, is used as a battering ram to prevent people from being able to access just about anything. When you get files back, if you do, after 5 years, they're just redacted pages of black. And so understanding how that actually be used and when it is not appropriate is another part of it. But finally, we need to actually hold the government to account against performance targets. If they set targets that say we are going to implement this many new positions in 12 months, then we go back and say, how are you doing against that target? You said 15 and there's only 5, not so good. Performance targets are what we expect in the nonprofit world, in the private sector, in education. We need them for government too, because then at least we've got something to point to say we know how you're doing and what you're telling us isn't the truth. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Yep, 30 seconds, Matt.
Couple of quick things in response. Again, on the FOIP thing, if Toby puts in a FOIP request for something and takes 5 years to get, and Sue puts in a same FOIP request, they start all over again. If you get a FOIP request and it's processed and done, make it available so that nobody else has to FOIP that same information again. That's correct. It's not right. Iraq, needs a complete overhaul because people don't know what is going on behind those closed doors, and we need to pull that curtain back and see how they're making their decisions. Land transparency.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. I also love being in a room of green folks because you guys get really excited about FOIPs and government accountability. Like, that was the closest you came to applause out of line? Well done. It's just...
Speaking to the people.
Yeah, thank you so much. I am just checking the time, see how much time we have. Okay, I'm going to move into our last section, and this one is on public health and public safety. As you both have talked about with CERB, we lived through a pandemic, and we all gave grace, understanding this was our first time going through that type of pandemic, and we hoped we would learn the lessons. Starting with you, Hannah. What do you see as one or two of the key lessons that we did learn from the COVID-19 pandemic, and how should they guide the PEI government's preparations to protect us from future epidemics and pandemics?
Okay. A lot of the lessons that we've learned in PEI are also lessons that have been learned in much broader jurisdictions. The social impact of COVID was something that I don't think any of us could have prepared for. The social impact in terms of what happens when you isolate and keep each other safe that way. What happens when you have to stop going to school for 6 months or you can't see your friends. And then what happens when people begin to push back and you start seeing a rapid rise of misinformation and disinformation about health. We are going to suffer the consequences of how the COVID pandemic was managed, probably for generations. And that's not just from a mental health perspective, but also a physical health perspective. You know that I've been a strong advocate for long COVID and the recognition of long COVID as a true condition that requires support. I know I have friends in the room today who are suffering the long-term health consequences of having had COVID, including me and my friend Daniel, who've both been very, very open about what happens when you get COVID one time too many and how that can impact your health on a long-term basis. So I think we need to have really strong conversations about the connection between community health, mental health, and social health, because we cannot separate them, and that's the lesson from COVID.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Matt?
Yeah, no, that's all so true. I mean, that is absolutely so true. What we've come through with COVID, we've gone back, we've regressed in so many ways. Something as simple as science-backed vaccines and seeing what's happened with the spread of measles, and I fully attribute that back to the disinformation campaigns that were waged during COVID, and the Secretary of Health in the United States is not really helping that matter. No. At all. We're going through the health PEI section in the budget debates now. We went through the Public Health Office this past week. There is no new money at all to promote vaccine awareness and the importance of vaccines to try and counter that disinformation that has been circulating and continues to circulate. And to me, that's a neglect of duty of this government, recognizing and knowing full well what's circulating online, which is false, lies. Let's call it what it is. It's lies and disinformation and misinformation online. We need to be investing in our public health office to get the truth out there, to get back up to speed on what vaccines do, because if that horse is getting out of the barn. COVID also exposed us to some of the deficiencies in our long-term care system, some of the atrocities that people who in those facilities have had to endure behind closed doors. And we need to invest in the upstream measures necessary so that we're protected.
Thank you so much. Hannah, 30 seconds.
No, I'm really glad that Matt mentioned long-term care, because while we didn't have perhaps the level of atrocities that happened in some other jurisdictions, that doesn't mean that our residents here experienced a good thing. And it also highlighted the risk that is inherent in kind of institutional type residences. So there's a lot of lessons learned, and I would like to be seeing the investment that says that we have learned those lessons and we're going to do something with that information. That's the role of public health, and it's a role that the government should support.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Another question around public health and public safety. This one, Matt, starting with you. Until quite recently, PEI has had years with some of the lowest rates of illicit drug use and overdose deaths in Canada. However, this has been changing with dangerous drugs like fentanyl appearing on the island starting in 2018 and 2019. Amid record drug seizures and overdose deaths in recent years, the Chief Public Health Office now acknowledges that PEI has a toxic drug supply crisis on its hands. What kind of measures do you believe are needed to address the roots of this problem and to protect vulnerable populations?
Yeah, we go back, we go really upstream on this one, Tate. We need to go really upstream. And we could go back as far upstream as implementing a basic income guarantee to give people the supports that they need at an income level. But specific to the issue, if we couch this in a discussion of public safety is so much more than police. We can't be throwing money at enforcement to correct an issue like this that's endemic in our society now with the strong drugs. We need to get away from the Pierre Poilievre approach of where we're going to increase sentences and we're going to throw people in jail and throw away the key. That is so ineffective in dealing with this issue. We're making some strides on the file. There's so much work that needs to be done. The fact that this government, after so many recommendations and reports, has decided to completely throw away the recommendation for a supervised consumption site as part of the umbrella of support services is really discouraging. And it was discouraging to hear the Chief Public Health Officer try to justify government's decision in that regard, because that is a piece and a component that fits in so well with what we're trying to offer by way of services at the Outreach Centre. Unfortunately, those are centralized. I think a decentralized approach is needed.
Thank you, Matt. Hannah?
Yeah, I think, it kind of connects in some ways to the discussions on the impact of the pandemic. We have to take the mental health crisis seriously. If anything, the pandemic kind of broke some of our social contracts, not just, in terms of how we take care of each other, but just the relationships in community. And the mental health crisis is the core behind the drug crisis. Homelessness, mental health, addictions issues are all connected. And so you can't sort of think you're going to throw something at one small part of that problem and it's going to magically get fixed. So more police absolutely are not the issue. Again, complex problems deserve complex solutions, but a housing first model and integrated services in the community at multiple points are critical. We cannot ghetto people into a space and have them, being treated with less than dignity, just for a situation that is not one of their own making. And frankly, even if it was, why does that matter? Everyone deserves security and dignity. They deserve to have somewhere safe to sleep. They deserve to have enough to eat, and they deserve to be treated like a human. And so that housing first model, integrated community services, and understanding that mental health sits at the root of almost all of these issues. And until we can address that part of our healthcare seriously and comprehensively, we are not going to be able to change the story.
Thank you so much. You have 30 seconds, Matt.
Well, thank you, Tate. It's a suite of services that needs to be provided, and government needs to take this issue seriously. And it really hasn't been. Carla's been hammering away for so long at this government on that piece. And as part of the suite of services too, we talk about supervised consumption site, but it's also providing the addiction detox facility beds that are needed at the end of the day when people are ready to make that next step in their addiction. And we don't have nearly enough of those either to service the needs.
Thank you so much. So that brings us to the end of 6 whole segments on policy. A round of applause for these candidates. They've done a fabulous job. Excellent. Thank you so much. See, you can see why if we did this after every question, we'd be here till 9 o'clock tonight. So we did have a few questions that came out during the AGM, and I'm sorry that we have skipped over most of those. I did commit to our candidates we wouldn't go over 2:30, but I have one question that has been submitted like 4 times, so I have to ask it, but you're only going to have 30 seconds each to answer.
Okay.
It's going to be like, what's your favorite color? Thank you. So the question is, Hannah, you get to go first.
Okay.
And Matt, same order. If you do not win the leadership contest, will you commit to running in the next election as an MLA?
Yes.
That was the fastest 30 seconds ever.
In fact, I would like to run in the next by-election.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Matt?
No, I quit. Yeah, I do commit to running in the next election. Promise. I promise.
People are going to be splicing this. Excellent. Thank you so much, folks. Thank you for that was so fast. Every answer was like that. Thank you to everyone who came out today. Thank you for those of you who attended the AGM and have stayed through. This is a long day, and I appreciate your commitment to being here. We are so excited, as the candidates have mentioned, about the enthusiasm that's growing around the Green Party here in Prince Edward Island, and we eagerly look forward to these by-elections and to the next provincial election to see what's going to happen with a future Green government. Thank you for engaging with this leadership campaign. Thank you for our candidates for putting their name forward and for all the work that they've put into running some really spectacular campaigns. Now I'm just going to go through some things you need to not forget. These will be recorded and posted online, so if you forget, you can go back and listen to them again. Please remember that in order to vote in this leadership contest, you must be a member of the Green Party of PEI by May 8th. That is this week. So please make sure that you are a member. If you intend to vote, you must be a member. If you're not sure how to become a member, come find me. We will walk you through it. We can make sure that that happens. If you have friends or family or neighbors or a stranger in the line behind you who keeps talking about the weather changes, who might be curious about the Green Party, now is a great time to encourage them to go back and listen to some of these events, which are all up on YouTube, and encourage them too to consider becoming a member to be able to vote in this leadership contest. We hope that you have been inspired listening to these two fabulous candidates. I know for me, every time I hear them speak, I'm just like gobsmacked about how smart they are. And so I hope that this has been a helpful exercise for you as well. If you would like to consider financially supporting either of these candidates or nominating them, which are two things that they need to do in order to be a part of this contest, you can do that at the table that's right at the door when you came in. So please consider that as well. We also would encourage you to mark your calendars for our leadership convention. This is like the first in our party's history, so it's going to be a great time. We're going to have a great little party. So please mark your calendars Saturday, June 7th from 1 to 4 p.m. at the Emergency Services Centre in Stratford. We'd encourage you all to be there. It's going to be a really fabulous event. We're going to have some good entertainment. We're going to have some good decorations, some good snacks, and then our lovely candidates and the official vote will occur at that time as well. So again, mark your day. If you can be there in person, we'd love for that to happen. If you are unable to join in person because life happens, we understand. We will be sad that you are not there, and we hope that you can make it, but we also want to make sure that there's an avenue for you to vote. You'll be able to request an absentee ballot, and this is where I'm checking my phone because I had Jordan send me the exact dates. So you will be able to request an absentee ballot online starting on May 9th. So that's the day after the memberships close. You'll be able to request that absentee ballot, and you can request it all the way through until June 1st. So you have to have that request for an absentee ballot in by June 1st because we require time to verify your identity and all of those good things. Then your request for that ballot will be granted. You'll get an email. You'll be able to submit your ballot, and you will be able to submit that until the end of the day on June 6th. So you will have right up until the convention to be able to submit that ballot if you need to do so as an absentee. So please make sure, mark your calendars. We'll make sure all of this is up on socials. You'll get a bunch of emails about it, but just now's a good time to take note of it. With that, I am going to close us off with our last question for our candidates. Mm-hmm. And I believe we've got a little extra. I'm going to give you 2 minutes for this one.
Wow.
Extra time. I know, I'm so generous. Our final question to our candidates is, given everything that is happening in our party, in the province, in the world, in this slightly dysfunctional timeline, what makes you the best leader for our party at this moment in time? So you each have 2 minutes, and Hannah, you get to go first.
Okay, thank you. Well, we will have 2 by-elections probably in the next 3 to 4 months, and we could be going to a provincial election as early as this time next year, despite the fixed election date being October 2027. That really doesn't track. These elections are critical for the Green Party of PEI to show Islanders that we are here to stay, that we are not ever going back to the two-party red-blue the way it always was before. But let's be clear, great policy alone doesn't win elections. Great candidates, great volunteers, and great campaigns win elections. So how do you run a great campaign when the clock is already ticking? You build a team that can hit the ground running, and that starts with a leader who has the experience we need. This leadership campaign is my 12th campaign. My first Green campaign was my own by-election in 2017. It was a hell of a way to start an election experience. But success was part of the nature of a by-election because all the resources are concentrated in a by-election. It's an incredible experience. But a huge part of that success were the Greens that came from across the country to help. There were people there from New Brunswick, from Nova Scotia, from Quebec, from Ontario, from Manitoba, from BC. We support and learn from each other. And I've been learning on the job ever since by volunteering on other campaigns across the country, because that's what Greens do. We pay back. Because what's good for Greens anywhere is good for Greens everywhere. I've campaigned in 3 PEI by-elections in D9, D10, D16, 2 provincial campaigns, 2 federal campaigns here in PEI. I was the campaign manager in Manitoba for Dave Nickars, door knocked with Megan Mitten, phone banked for David Kuhn, rallied with Mike Schreiner in Ontario, and spoke at the AGM in BC for the Federal Green Party. I am bringing that extensive experience with me as a leadership candidate. You already know about my success as a legislator, but this is about the party needing a leader who can organise, build, and win, and who values the team more than the position.
Thank you
I am
so
running
much.
to be leader to help Greens elect Greens and bring PEI its first Green government. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. All right, Matt, go ahead.
Thank you, Tayte. We have a real opportunity right now in our province as a party to be the choice for Islanders in the next election. I speak to Islanders every day from tip to tip in our province who are ready for real progressive change. Islanders want a government that listens to them and responds in a way that addresses our challenges as a province. These challenges run from healthcare to housing to fighting climate change to ensuring we leave a healthy province for our children. What we have now, ladies and gentlemen, is a government that is hell-bent on taking us down a path to privatization of our healthcare system and our long-term care. It's ignorant of the importance of our land and land protection, is unable to provide housing to those who need it, and is unable to provide protections to the most vulnerable in our society. There's so many other examples of where this government is not meeting the needs of Islanders right now at this time and in this critical, important moment. We need a leader now more than ever that is going to stand up to this misguided and unfocused direction and take hold of the wheel to get us on a proper course simply before it becomes too late. Islanders are tired, we've heard it, of the same red-blue back and forth. They're tired of doing that, and they're tired of doing that and seeing no tangible change and no improvement to our quality of lives as Islanders here. They're looking for something new that will actually address and solve problems. The Green Party under my leadership is the only Ireland party that will bring forward good policy, evidence-based policy that will benefit the lives of Islanders and make a tangible difference to us in our province. There's no denying that we're seeing a lot of challenges in our province. We see them every day. We've talked about them here this afternoon at length, and we've provided what we believe to be the solutions to those problems. I'm looking for your support so that together, because it's going to take a team, it's going to take all of us together, that we can take on these challenges and build the country, build the province that is the absolute envy of this country. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, folks. And thank you, Hannah and Matt, for just incredible answers and thoughtfulness and standing on your feet for an hour and a half. You've done a great job. Thank you to everyone who was here. As you saw, there was lots of papers being passed to me, and most of them were questions, but at least half, which is another signal of the way our party operates, were pleased to consider staying at the end, volunteers to help us put away chairs and tables. So if you're able to stay, we would appreciate some help, but if you're not, totally fine. Again, we want to remind you, May 8th is our deadline for membership, and June 7th is going to be the convention where you'll get to vote on which of these two wonderful folks will be leading us into the next chapter as our party. Thank you so much for being here, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, Bill.
Folks, just before we depart, there's one thank you that hasn't been extended today, and that is to Tayte Willows, who this is Tate's second time at moderating, and she has just done an outstanding job. I refer to her as the Wonder Woman of the Green Party of Prince Edward Island. She's just so energetic, has such a skill set and such passion. We are so fortunate to have Tayte Willows on the team. Thank you, Tayte.